Welcome to Sasquatch and Sourdough, the podcast where we embark on a journey into the depths of the unknown.
The mystery of life.
Weaving together threads of ancient scripture.
What do you mean, biblical?
Tales of high strangeness.
Tell them about the Twinkie.
Whether you're a seeker of truth.
We believe it's the heart of the house.
Or simply hungry for a good story.
What about the Twinkie?
Sasquatch and Sourdough invites you to join us on a journey of discovery, wonder, and deliciousness.
They feel your methods, your theories are
Spooky.
So grab your backpack, sharpen your senses,
Do you think I'm spooky?
and prepare to explore the sacred mysteries of our highly strange world like never before.
And that is the whole problem with aliens.
An uneasy quiet came over the storytellers, who had been then drawn into an even tighter circle, when Brom Bones leaned forward and began to speak. One evening, while returning from a neighboring village, Brom said he encountered the Night Rider. He challenged the headless fellow and his goblin horse to a race for a bowl of punch, and claimed that he would have drunk the victory punch too, as he and his horse Daredevil easily trounced the ghost. But as they came to the plank bridge, the Hessian bolted and disappeared in a flash of sparks and fire. None of this was lost on Ichabod. Still, he took his turn to speak, reciting some of his old anecdotes from his book of New England witchcraft. But here is what I think. All of this just frightened him all the more. Slowly, the party began to break up as the night grew late. The merrymakers loaded up their wagons and carriages and rattled home. But convinced he was on the high road to success in the arena of love, Ichabod lingered for a while to court Katrina. What was said or what happened between these two would-be lovers late that night, I don't know. But something went terribly wrong, for when he sailed forth, he went not dancing, but crestfallen. It was the witching time of night when Ichabod, discouraged and defeated in love, mounted old Gunpowder and started his ride homeward. The night was as dismal as Ichabod himself. His only company was the melancholy chirp of a cricket or a sad hoot of an owl. And now, as Ichabod rode into the dark, those stories of ghosts and goblins began creeping into his mind. Never had he felt so alone. What was worse, he was approaching one of the spots long famous in ghostly tales. Coming up, hard ahead, was the giant gnarled tulip tree where Major Andre had been hanged at the hands of British soldiers. Well, welcome back to Sasquatch and Sourdough. I am your host, Christina, and I am joined on this spooky night with my beautiful best friend, Crystal.
Hi, everybody.
Hooray! It's the end of spooky season.
It's not over yet.
It's not over yet. This episode is probably going to come out, I think, on Halloween night. So
that'd be great.
we wanted to give you kind of a palate cleanser episode. Our last two were a little deep.
Oh, well, just a little.
Just a little. And spooky. So if you haven't listened to them, our episodes with Alex Shea, please go back and do that. We had an amazing time with her.
Yeah, she's great. I
Yeah.
really enjoyed meeting her.
It was really cool.
I can't wait to talk to her again.
Yeah, we're definitely gonna have her on.
Chock full of awesome stories.
Crazy stuff.
Yeah.
But so we wanted to just kind of go back in time a little bit, and give you a little taste of Sleepy Hollow.
Sleepy Hollow.
Sleepy Hollow. So
That's my favorite story.
yeah, so this excerpt that you guys heard is from this adorable children's book by Will Moses. It's The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, obviously by Washington Irving. I mean, if you've spent any time in America, you've heard the story of the Headless Horseman.
Definitely.
It's just everywhere in pop culture.
So the first time I had ever seen the Headless Horseman was when I was a little girl, and we had the Disney Channel.
Yep.
Which was, not everybody had the Disney Channel,
Mm-mm.
but we had it. And my favorite thing in the world was when they would play Sleepy Hollow.
I love
That
that.
was my favorite Disney story, and that's where my love of Sleepy Hollow came from. The Disney Channel.
I loved that. And so when I would like go back and try to watch it with my son, like when he was little,
Mm-hmm.
we would watch that, but we didn't have the Disney Channel, obviously. I think it was on like Netflix or something.
Mm-hmm.
And it was 2 in 1. It was
The Toad.
yes.
What is it?
It was
Not the
Mr. Toad's
Mr. Toad.
Wild Ride.
Yep.
Okay, both narrated by Bing Crosby. So
Mhm.
that's definitely back in the day.
Yep.
I love it's so good. But we had to get through Mr. Toad's Wild Ride
We would always fast forward Mr. Toad.
because it made my son insane.
Yeah.
Like it gave me such anxiety
Uh-huh.
because it's just like he had to go, go, go.
What were those? What were they? Weasels? or
Yeah, like the
something?
weasels.
Like his henchmen.
Yeah.
That overtook the house.
The mayor.
Yeah, they overtook the mayor's house, and they were just really bad.
It was ridiculous.
And then there was the whole trial with
Yeah.
Mr. Toad.
They like Mr. Toad was like overthrowing the government and then he got caught but he was for some reason just like rolling around the countryside in a crazy car and it was just
as fast as he could
go.
He was a wild toad.
So you're trying to like get to the nice quiet like autumn like bum ba-dum bum bum of like
Yeah.
Bill Crosby. What? Bing Crosby. No, I'm thinking Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young.
Oh.
What am I doing? Anyway. Yeah, so you
We
had to
love
get
it.
through that. Oh my gosh.
We
but-
watch it every year. And
Yeah.
I sing every single song. I know every single song.
Oh, fair Katrina.
Yeah, Katrina, my love. Love is a partridge.
Ripe rosy cheeks. It's so ridiculous. Like, but it was like kind of romantic, and then it just got so sad. So anyway, that little retelling is from this really adorable children's book. It's so well illustrated, and it tells the entire story of the legend. But we're not going to really get into the legend tonight. What we wanted to do was just share some experiences that Crystal had, just her experience going there, and then some really interesting, like kind of local lore that is still there.
So, Eric and I, my husband and I, we went to New York one year to see a band in Brooklyn. And the next morning when we woke up, we didn't want to be in the city anymore. We had had enough of the city. And I've always been really obsessed with Sleepy Hollow. So we decided to take the Hudson River. The road goes through New York City, and it just follows the Hudson River straight up into like upstate New York. So when we were driving, I started noticing Harrytown, which is the town right before Sleepy Hollow. And I just got so excited. I was like, all of this is actually real. These places are actually real. And once we got to Sleepy Hollow, I was just like a kid in a candy store. I couldn't believe it. I was so happy to be out of the busy, horrible city and in this beautiful countryside. And it was fall.
I was going to ask, like,
It was October. So they were gearing up for their like Headless Horseman festival.
Yeah.
So I don't have the book on me, and I'm really sorry, but I bought a book there at the Dutch church.
Yes.
This man wrote this story about Sleepy Hollow, and he had all of these historical facts about Washington Irving after like each little chapter, and he told all about his life and like where he lived before he wrote the story and the reason why. And so Washington Irving was like a budding author, and he didn't get much acclaim. Like, I think you told me earlier, people thought he was like boring and kind of stale.
Yeah.
And he decided to write something fantastical, and it really took off. And it's what gave him a name. Really,
And it's what he
that
knew.
story. Yeah.
He like knew the
He knew the
countryside. Yeah.
Mhm. So we went to the Dutch church. We saw all of the old tombstones. Like, you know what the old tombstones look like? Where it's like the angels like etched on them.
Yes.
But they're like really weird and crude looking.
Yeah.
They're not very well done. It's just like a face with like some wings.
Yeah.
And I'm sure people have seen that before in like really old cemeteries. So the cemetery is from like the 1700s. And the area was settled like like way before the Revolutionary War. These people were already settled when the Revolutionary War came. They had like a thriving community. And we went to the cemetery. We went over the bridge, the famous bridge.
Oh, wow.
We got pictures on the bridge. We just spent the day kind of tooling around the cemetery and taking pictures of all the beautiful trees and the foliage.
Oh.
And it was just one of the most beautiful, and like the most beautiful, like little quaint town, you know, because it's everything there is like preserved, historically preserved.
Yeah.
So all the buildings and everything are just, they're just so cute, and I don't know, it's just beautiful. I love it.
That sounds amazing.
It was really cool.
And I love that it was just like, yeah, let's go.
Yeah, because we were in Brooklyn, and it was like cramped and gross and stinky, and there's like
what show did you see?
Everywhere. We saw this band, The Deers.
Oh, okay.
It's like this indie rock band.
Yeah.
From like the early 2000s. Anyway, so we went to the show. We had a great time at the show. We almost didn't make it home because we didn't know where we were.
Yes.
So we had a cab driver drop us off. And he was like, I'll be here at the end of the show. And we didn't think about it. And we left the show, and we were like, you know, wandering around Brooklyn, kind of lost. And then here comes the cab driver around the corner, and he's like, I'm here to get you guys. We were
what?
Like, you just saved our lives. He waited for us.
I feel like that's unheard of.
We didn't think, I think he knew we were out of town.
Yeah.
He was like kind of scared for us. Because, I mean, we're from Baltimore, but Baltimore's tiny. And we know our way around here. So, he picked us up. He saved our lives. He took us back to our hotel room. Next morning, we woke up. We realized we don't like it here. No. We need to go out into the country.
Yes.
It was really neat.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was really cool.
I love that. Oh, yeah. I know. I've never been there. But, I mean, this time of year, that's like all you see on Instagram is like everybody is like, there's so many great accounts of just like, you know, fall aesthetic in Sleepy Hollow. And it has to capture exactly like that magic of fall.
Yeah. Well, they do this whole thing there too. We didn't have time to do it because we didn't stay until the evening. But in the evening, they do this like haunted house thing, like through the forest, where they dress somebody up as the headless horseman, and he like chases you around.
Oh,
so
that's
you take
cool.
Like a haunted hayride, like out into the forest where Ichabod Crane would have been walking.
It's like a reenactment.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's a reenactment. And we wanted to do it so bad, but we had to get home to our babies.
Oh.
Our kids were little.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we'll go again. We'll go again. With
Definitely.
Our kids this time, because now they have the same love for it.
That would be awesome. We should definitely do that.
Yeah. Great trip.
Yeah. There was, so you talked about like the old Dutch church. So there's actually a story about that. So they do like a reenactment. Hang on, let me look at my notes. Because there's actually a lot of, outside of, you know, Ichabod Crane and the Headless Horseman and that account and that story, there's still a lot of like weird stuff that happens there. Yeah. So there's a story about Hulda, and she's like a Bohemian witch that got caught up into some of, I guess you would call it like Revolutionary War sort of history, but there's no real telling of whether or not she actually existed. But what they do is, so around Rockefeller State Park, it's like a preserve. They do like a reenactment, and it's really cool. They do like a lantern tour at night, and they have like walking tours and a campfire. And what they do is they just like kind of go around and do like a reenactment of like kind of what happened to her.
Okay, so not far from Spook Rock is where Hulda's cottage was. Hulda was a Bohemian woman who came without references or kin and settled in the midst of very conservative folks who were familiar with each other's grandparents. So she was a stranger, so they were suspicious to her.
Mm-hmm.
And in the 1700s, people believed in witches.
Yeah.
They really thought that was something that you needed to be worried about. So in those times, if you were a stranger, you were basically guilty until proven otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
So no one would be her friend. They kept a really far distance from her. She used to do things like gather herbs, and she knew specific remedies for curing colds and fevers. She was very wise, which
Yeah.
was also something that women should not be in that time.
It really reminds me of Muldier.
She wove baskets, and basically she was just a woman in her own right, and everyone was very suspicious of her. So she spent a long time just kind of hanging out by herself in her hut, and people stayed really far away from her. And then when the revolutionary times came and all of the men started marching and patrolling the highways that were there through the town, to intercept cattle thieves and things like that, she was the type of woman that would come out and fight for her own property. So she got her rifle and she came out and she fought, like, when it came down to it. And
All
it
right,
was
Huldah.
time- Yeah. When it was time for like the local militia to rise up and fight for their land and their right to be there, she fought, and she fought really well.
Oh, wow.
And that was when everyone realized, like, wow, this woman, she's with us.
Yeah.
Like, she's not so strange anymore.
Just like a patriot.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh.
But unfortunately, she was killed in action while she
Oh,
was
wow.
fighting for her, with
Her
the town.
property.
Yeah. So the people had a change of heart, and they decided to give her a Christian burial in the Dutch church. So you can actually find her tombstone there along one of the furthest walls.
Mhm.
So they thought, witch or not, she was a hard fighter and she helped us out, and we feel kind of bad.
Yeah.
So they buried her in the church, and then they went to her home to see if there was anything that they could like bury her with, and they found her Bible. And inside of her Bible, there was a little piece of paper that informed the people that lived there that she actually had a cache of gold. that
What?
She was planning on giving it to the widows who lost their husbands during
Oh my
the
gosh.
skirmishes. Then they felt really bad. They were like, man, we treated this woman like dirt.
Oh, okay. So, let's see. I see a correlation here. Not a witch.
Not a witch.
Actually pretty Christian.
She had a Bible. And she was planning
And she was doing exactly what you're supposed to do, is take care of the widows and orphans.
Yeah.
Bad superstitious
know.
people.
Horrible.
That happen all the time.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I think this account,
Huldah.
I know Huldah, the Bohemian. She's probably Hungarian. She's probably my ancestor.
Oh, yeah.
She's an amazing gypsy woman. But like what I've actually kind of found is like, so in this account, it's interesting because it's this, it should say that it's from like where it's from. The guy who he did like a historical, it's an excerpt from Chronicles of Tarrytown, which was the original name before they renamed, or no, it was, right? It was Tarrytown and Sleepy Hollow.
Yes.
Yeah.
But now they've renamed everything.
Right.
So they actually renamed the area Sleepy Hollow for the acclaim of the
Yes.
story, because it brings in tourism.
Yeah.
You know, that's not really spoken about too often, but
It was Tarrytown.
yeah.
Like on the old maps. But so that was an excerpt from Chronicles of Tarrytown and Sleepy Hollow by Edgar Mayhew Bacon, 1897. So he was kind of like
Wow.
the historical historian, I guess, that wrote all of the history. And it's funny because in his account, like he says, like 100 years ago, people were very superstitious. People really believed in witchcraft. So even when I've gone back and like when I was doing research on like Muldier, like we have an episode on that. That was like a same kind of thing. Like, don't really know if she existed, but she was a healer woman in a hut somewhere and met a bad end because of people's superstitions. But what they do, I feel like there's kind of like this trope, I guess, of like in the 1800s, when we're writing our history down, we need to really remind ourselves that, oh, back in those days, everyone was really super. So they're kind of like rebranding themselves as like, we're not really superstitious anymore.
Yeah.
You know, we're not really getting into all the witchcraft stuff. We don't believe in that anymore. This is just like, I don't know if it's an excuse to like, you know, I guess.
I feel like you don't see the term witch anymore branded on women that are executed because they're strange and unusual.
Right. We
That
kind of got
was-
over that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a term that you'll see often. There were so many witches
Yeah.
because people just, they used that term
Yeah.
for women that were educated, intelligent, clever.
Healing of some sort, like definitely
Yeah.
had some sort
healing
of,
arts,
right.
which is just herbology. We still use it to this day. Yeah.
I used it when we were just sick and I had like I made it last year. I had to throw it out though because I didn't do it right. We should definitely do an episode on like remedies and how to do them properly. I had like garlic and honey that I had for like a year, and it was like, yes, as soon as we're sick, I'm going to use this. And I brought it out. It's been sitting on my windowsill in my kitchen, and like I brought it out, and like the top of it had like, it was like black, and I was like, I'm not giving this to my family.
That's black mold.
I'm not going to do that. But so okay, this is really funny. Speaking of superstition, so you know I've been doing like all these like prayer hikes and stuff like that. So I was doing that in like the park that we always go to.
Yeah.
My usual like hike up and down. It was like beautiful fall day, and I wasn't really sure like what, you know, I was just kind of like in my zone, and I was like, all right, what should I be praying about? And I got like the feeling to like pray against like superstition. So listen to this. This is crazy. You can't make this stuff up. Like, I'm walking my usual way, but I stopped because when I got down to like where I was going to go downhill, there was like a lady with a dog, and I was like, I don't feel like dealing with this. So I turned around and went back the other way. So it was kind of like that T area where it's like, we walk usually in this like big sort of like wooded area that is right next to a graveyard. So when I walked back, I was at like the crossroad of like the path from the graveyard and then the path to like go downhill, like to go back where I came.
Yep.
Not kidding. As soon as I got like the feeling to like pray against like superstition, I walk, I turn to my right, can't make this up. I look down the path into the woods, there's a black cat.
Aww.
And I was like, oh, okay. Like this kind of superstition, like people back in the day would have been like, what?
That was part of the reason why the Black Plague became so, you know, I don't know what the word is, but
out of hand.
Yeah, out of hand. There you go. So I think it was like a pope or somebody like that decided that cats were evil, so he killed all the cats.
Yeah.
And then there weren't any cats anymore to kill
eat the
rats that had the fleas that had the plague.
It's like an amazing nursery story.
It is. It's a nursery rhyme. Killed the cats, killed the rats, and had the fleas, and had the plague.
And then everybody died in the 15th century.
Now everyone's dead.
Stop killing cats.
It was
Oh my
like
gosh.
3/4 of the population.
I mean, I don't know. Cats are, I don't know. Some cats, I look at them and I'm like, what are you thinking?
What are you thinking about?
What are you thinking about?
They have deep like,
They
brains.
really do. They're in another dimension. But yeah, so when we were kind of doing a little bit of research about this, I looked up, like, I don't really know a lot about Washington Irving. So he did like a whole, he's known for like I guess he did like a history of George Washington that didn't
It's so boring.
really, yeah. I mean, everything back then was like kind of, boring. It's like reading Moby Dick. Like, it's like 18,000 pages of
Did you
just...
ever try to slog through that one?
Yeah, I had to because I was an
geez.
English major and I had to write a paper about it. So I had to pay attention. And I was like, this is all about whaling. I have zero interest in
It's
this.
so sad.
I don't want to know anything about whaling ever again. But Washington Irving, so this is a really fun, weird fact that really piqued my interest. So Edgar Allan Poe, I think I have a quote here. He did not really like him. And he said, quote, that Irving is much overrated. He said that in 1838. And like critics also claimed that he catered to the British sensibilities. So it was kind of like they didn't like him because I guess when he was trying to like be popular and, write history.
Well, he lived abroad for a long time.
Yeah.
He lived like over in Europe for a while.
And that was probably contentious back then. Like they didn't like that.
I think he had a lot. I think he grew up with money.
Yeah.
He wasn't like a starving artist like Edgar Allan Poe. He
Right.
was an orphan who like needed everybody's help.
Yeah.
I
I just love that. I was like, oh, wow. Okay. Look at Edgar just throwing everybody under the bus. It kind of reminds me of,
He
well,
didn't care.
did you know that there's like...
He didn't have any reputation to lose.
No, he didn't. Yeah.
He was like,
No, you're right.
whatever.
He was
I'm
just
gonna
like,
say
I'm
what I
just going
want.
to say whatever I want.
I mean what I say.
Yeah. But there's like, it reminded me, as soon as I read that, I was like, this really reminds me of, I don't know if you know this, but I just found this out. Robert Smith like hated Morrissey. They hate each other.
Oh, I did know that. I remembered learning that when I was obsessed with them.
So guys,
in my
we
20s.
obviously like loved the Smiths and the Cure,
They
and
were the bands I grew up
that's
with.
like what we grew up
It's
with.
like the basis of my whole entire music,
Yeah.
education.
But I love that. I just started seeing that because I think we like followed so I think on Instagram, like our account follows like some Cure fans account. And it's funny because that account like takes sides with Robert Smith. And I'm like, what are you guys, 10?
Nah.
Like, come on. But it's so funny because if you look at old interviews, like Robert Smith's just like, yeah, he's boring. So it's like the same thing. Or no, what did you say? He said he was like,
A pompous ass?
or no, it was more like, it must be like, I don't know the quote, but it was something along the lines of like, it's got to be exhausting being that like, intellectual. That's what it was.
Oh,
And I was
okay.
like, wow, that's a whole burn. I know, but we digress. So yeah, but Washington Irving, outside of like all of Sleepy Hollow, I promise we'll get back to like we have a couple more things, but I thought this was really crazy. So what he did, outside of being like overrated, he wrote he had a book called The Sketchbook, and he kind of defends like traditional Christmas in this book. It's really interesting. It's like 5 or 6 like stories, like Christmas traditional stories. And so what he did is after that, in 1812, he wrote revisions to A History of New York, and he inserted a dream sequence of St. Nicholas, like soaring over treetops in a flying wagon. And that's where we get like our image of Santa Claus.
Okay.
So it's really neat because
So did he create that?
I don't know enough to like speak. That would have to be like
Yeah.
something I'd have to look into,
Yeah.
but it's just so cool to me. Like we have all of this stuff that we know like now, like we know about the Legend of Sleepy Hollow. Like we know,
It's imagery
it's,
and pop
yeah,
culture.
like everything that we're kind of like, it's such a big thing around this time of year. And then obviously we have like our Christmas traditions, that we're so used to. And we don't really think about like
where it came
in
from.
those times though, here's this guy who like everybody's kind of poo-pooing. And then he like gave us all of these really interesting and cool traditions.
Yeah.
So good job.
That's like a fantastical way of looking at, St. Nicholas.
I know. I love St. Nicholas.
Such a beautiful thing to give us.
And look, we're back to Christmas. Christmas. No.
Oh. Our brains.
I know. Exactly. I'm almost there. But like, and apparently I don't know exactly the correlation, but there is some sort of like flat earth tie to Washington
geez.
Irving. So I just wrote that down as a note for all of our flat earth friends. You are seen. You are seen and loved. But we digress. So in that like kind of little retelling of Huldah, oh, I feel so bad for her. There's a mention of Spook Rock, and so there is like an actual kind of, it's supposed to be a pretty haunted area. I couldn't find any like hauntings, like people's accounts now, but a lot of it is just kind of like stuff that happened back then that it's like, it's known to be like kind of like haunted or whatever. Okay. So this is one of the origin stories of Spook Rock. And there is like a lady in white that is supposed to have been seen. I know. I do too. They're like all over the place, the lady in white stories. So there's supposed to be that. But then I found this is really interesting. So the quick version is a young Native American hunter one quiet night finds himself in the presence of celestial maidens, enraptured in dance and song atop Spook Rock, or as he knows it, a sacred council rock of his people. Amazed by the sight, he gasps, and in doing so, scares away the maidens, excluding one who lingers to lay eyes on the intruder before she vanishes with her brethren up into the sky.
Oh,
So that's really cool. I know. Unable to sleep, eat, or think straight, the native hunter returns repeatedly to Spook Rock in hopes of finding the maidens dancing there again, but he doesn't see them. Eventually, after some time has passed, his diligence is rewarded, and he crashes their revelry to capture the beautiful maiden who had lingered before. He marries and has a child with the celestial maiden, and while at first she seemed to miss her home in the stars, she soon falls into domestic bliss. After some years, the sound of singing and cavorting echoes from the woods, as it often does, And longing once again returns in her, but she holds fast. Another night of the sounds of her friends proves too much, and she leaves her husband and child and does not come back. His mother gone, the child cries, won't eat, and eventually dies. The native hunter buries his son along the banks of the Pacantico and racked with despair, walks off into the wilderness and is never seen again. His hut falls apart with the passing of the years, and when it is no more than a ruin, the celestial maiden returned. She thinks she has only been gone for a few hours, when years have passed instead, and finds her family and child missing, and their hut a pile of rubble. She doesn't understand the unequal passage of time, thinks it's a cruel trick, or that she has the wrong time. It is said that on a clear and quiet nights with a crisp blanket of stars overhead, you can see lights dancing in the woods at Spook Rock. And even then, you might see the celestial maiden moving alone through the forest along the Pacantico River, forever searching for what she lost.
Oh, that sounds like a fairy hole.
Or a portal to
So,
lost time.
In fairy lore,
Mhm.
when you are drawn into the fairy realm, you lose time. And when you come back,
That's right.
you are the same age as you were when you left, because time is completely different in the fairy realm. So when there's this old story, I don't remember where it's from, but there was a man in the forest and he gets lured into the fairy realm by dancing women. And it's an all-night party where he just dances all night long. And then when the sun rises, he leaves and he goes home. And he thinks it's just been an evening of him dancing, but it's actually been like 100 years or something.
Oh, wow.
And everyone he knew is dead and gone. And he still looks exactly the same as he did when he left. That's fairy lore.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy.
Yep.
So now, like today, it says that if you look at Spook Rock, it's hard to imagine like how. So it's like a large flat boulder.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're looking at it, you're like, how can you just have like all these dancing maidens? But it's also, it says like you can also see how like local tribes like would have like picked that spot for a place of meeting. So there's not a lot of like chunks of rock. It's just like really sort of like a flat sort of boulder. So I guess they were probably like around that area. But this says we will never know if it ever truly was a sacred native site or a council rock, or what likely mundane occurrence prompted a traveler to think that they hear. So people like would report hearing singing and like lights through the trees at night. But the spot does have some magic to it, whether it has always been there or if it's due to the power of the story itself. But like I can't find any accounts. So if anybody is from like that part of New York or knows any lore, I would be interested to know that, because
That is 100% fairy lore.
right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the dancing,
Yeah.
the lost time,
Mm-hmm.
definitely. And being that when she left, her child died. It was like her magical spirit was
Right.
attached to that child, and
Maybe that's what called her back.
yeah, maybe the child was like part fairy, part human, and couldn't live without her.
I love all the fairy lore.
Me too.
I love
There's
that
actually
stuff.
a place near Sleepy Hollow, not very near, but on the way back home when you travel through
Mm-hmm.
New Jersey, there's this whole park that's dedicated to fairies.
Oh, really?
And people go there and they make like little fairy doors and
Mhm.
things on the tree trunks.
Yeah.
So it's like a path, and it's like the fairy path or something. I don't actually remember what it's called. But one of my friends had posted it on some social media site, and I was like, oh my God, I got to visit this place. So it's like a fairy path, and on the trunks of the trees are all the little fairy doorways
Yeah.
that people have just made. to
And
make
they
it
just
look
put
like
there,
magical,
yeah.
You know.
Like whimsy.
Yeah, like you would
Aw.
take the kids there and be like, look, fairy door.
Well, that's really cute.
Yeah.
So that's the origin story of like Spook Rock. Now, this doesn't give, I mean, I guess this would be before the account of like the witch lady.
Mm-hmm. What year was
Hulda.
that?
It doesn't give a year, but it's like if it's
Native
back in the Native
American.
American,
Native
yeah.
American.
So it's probably,
Yeah.
I just think that's really
That's awesome.
so like what a cool origin story of both cultures. You know,
Yeah.
I've never heard of anything like that before, like Native American and
No.
like fairy lore
Mixed with,
together.
like that would be like Irish or Scottish.
Yeah.
You know where the fairies come from.
Ooh,
That's
we
like
should
Irish and
ask.
Scottish lore.
So I was on Tommy Collum's Let's Get Freaky podcast,
Oh,
and
yeah.
we're gonna have him on. He's
Okay,
awesome.
he
Guys,
is.
go watch
Sounds
or
awesome.
listen to all of his stuff. He's great. But I want to have him on to tell us like because
Okay.
he's in England.
Okay.
He's in Essex, England.
Nice.
I was like, oh, you're in Essex. I said, I'm close to an Essex. And I was like, it's probably not.
It's not anything like your Essex.
He's like, I don't know. There's some sus spots in England too. But I want to have him on to tell us like all the cool like fairy stuff that he
That's
knows.
awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I have one. This is so funny. So this website was really, really cool, guys. If you're interested, they have a ton. I mean, there's like outside of like folklore and ghost stories, there's crime and murder. Like there's all kinds of stuff that's going on, like weird and unexplained things in that part of Sleepy Hollow. It's Sleepy Hollow Country. I'll post that in the description. But one thing that was hilarious to me was, and I don't know if anybody, so somebody posted online, I'm trying to think of who it was, but they were talking about seeing a black squirrel and how,
Seen black. Oh, that was the first time I've ever seen a black squirrel. Was
Yeah.
in Sleepy Hollow.
really?
Yes, I saw one. And Eric told me that they are popular in D.C.
Yes,
Around
they are.
D.C., like Arlington, Virginia.
Yes.
That's where they come from.
Yes.
I saw this squirrel and I couldn't believe it. I was like, are my eyes deceiving me or is that a black squirrel?
No, they exist. And guess what? They exist around here. Like, so we're actually recording at Crystal's house because she has an amazing Halloween, Crystal and I have like two different Halloween aesthetics going on. Hers is like super amazingly spooky, and
Spooky.
I am just like red country bumpkin. Like I've got every type of like
Happy fall, y'all.
exact. Yeah.
That's Christina.
Back in the day, I would have like been in complete competition with you, but now I'm in competition with my my neighbor across the street with how many fantasy pumpkins I can put on my front porch. So that's where I am. Yeah, happy fall, y'all.
I'm a spooky, spooky girl.
So
Horror movies every single day. I got some really spooky characters in my front lawn.
yes, you do. Yeah, you actually have something that looks like
I have the plague doctor.
yeah, you've got the plague doctor.
It's amazing.
So this is like the perfect like aesthetic for us to
I fell in love with him.
Record.
I saw him at Home Depot and I said, I must have him.
come home with me. Don't bring any rats or cats.
No, he like protects us from
From
rats and cats with their fleas and their plague.
and the squirrels. But oh man, who was it? I'm trying to think, but there's black squirrels around here. So the park that we go to is
Yeah,
very close
yeah.
to here. And it's crazy because every time I drive the same way, it's like I see the same black squirrel and I'm like, oh, there you are.
I
Hello.
think it's the same family.
Yeah.
Our friend, I'm not going to say her name, but we have a friend that I used to walk with around our neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
And when we would walk back there towards the park on this specific road, we would see a family of black
squirrels.
And I freaked out because I was like, the only time I've ever seen these things was in New York.
Yeah.
And Eric sees them in Washington, D.C. So she was like, I've never seen a black squirrel.
It's crazy.
Well, now you have. And I think we saw them like 3 or 4 times
Yeah.
walking the same road. It's like a whole little family. They're reproducing.
They are.
Mm-hmm.
So like when I was going through this website, it was like squirrel lore or something. And I was like, what's going on with the squirrel? So apparently there was one account of like, this was in the 1800s where there was apparently a bunch of trash that was like liquor, chocolate liqueur, I guess. And
Okay.
so the squirrels, it was like outside of a bar and like the squirrels got into it and started acting crazy,
And they got drunk.
I guess.
Squirrel.
And then here's one. This is again from the same website. It's called Those Wild and Crazy Tarrytown Squirrels.
Oh.
Once again, we thank the Daily Item of Port Chester, New York, for the story about Tarrytown squirrels. While squirrel attacks against humans are not unknown, they aren't an everyday occurrence unless you happen to be on Beekman Avenue in May of 1948 when the squirrels seemed to go berserk.
Berserk.
Berserker. Berserker squirrels. Over the course of 2 days, squirrels allegedly attacked 3 people on Beekman Avenue in North Tarrytown, today's Sleepy Hollow. In the first incident, a squirrel leaped upon a 16-year-old, biting her on both wrists.
Ew.
The squirrel quickly turned its attention to another lady gnawing on her finger.
Oh, man.
The Daily Item reported both the victims of squirrel attacks were treated at Tarrytown Hospital, and the Humane Society was called upon to send protection against the animals for
Were
the
they rabid?
for the populace. Can we just put them down?
Were they rabid?
I would imagine.
Did everybody that got bit die?
I don't know.
It's crazy.
It says the Tarrytown squirrel or squirrels attacked again 2 days later, biting Andrew Galados as he walked near the Van Tassel apartments. This time the SPCA, so this is in the 40s, actually sent a representative to investigate the situation, but the newspaper reported he searched in vain for the marauding beasts and couldn't find them. We think our friends in Port Chester searched in vain for a real news story. So this is probably another made up.
That sounds real to me. That's
I don't
like
know.
some rabid squirrels.
Why wouldn't you just shoot it?
Berserk on some people.
This is berserk squirrels.
Did they know what the rabies were in the 40s?
I would imagine, yeah.
I hope so.
I mean, they had the yeah.
well, shouldn't they test for that?
Just shoot the squirrel.
Just shoot every squirrel you see.
I mean, the rabid one, it's like on your finger. That's insane.
Right?
So I thought that was really funny. Like, of all the things to come across, just rabid berserk squirrels. So watch out. So yeah, I think that'll do it here. We just wanted to give you a little palate cleanse. Yeah. I don't know. We're kind of segueing. We naturally segue, and I like it. So maybe we'll have to do a deep dive into fairies.
I think that's a great idea. I
Yes.
would love to do a deep dive on fairies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ever since I think one of the best accounts, just like podcasts. I used to love the Lore podcast. Shout out Aaron Mankey.
Yeah,
And that he did an account of the changeling, and there are some
Yes.
spooky stories.
There really are.
Just people really, again, getting wrapped up in superstition.
Fairy mound.
Yeah.
How do you
Yes.
explain that?
Yeah. So many weird things.
But I want to say something very quickly.
Mhm.
So the Appalachian Mountain, where this would have occurred in New York,
Mhm.
actually at one time when there was a landmass called Pangea,
Yeah.
and the mountains and the highlands of Scotland are the same exact mountain range.
That's
that
right.
Are the Appalachian.
Yep.
So if you have fairies and fairy mounds in Scotland,
Mm-hmm.
you may very well have them here in the United States in the Appalachian Mountains.
And then we'll get into portals
So
coming soon.
I don't know.
That's exciting.
Mhm.
There's an explanation for something.
Very definitely.
All of the weirdness is already the veil is thinning. Here we are. Let's talk about the weird portals of fairy magic.
The ancient, old things that
Yes.
live before us.
Ugh,
Love it.
I do too. All right. Well, we love you guys. Thank you so much. We are I'm so excited and jazzed about where this podcast is going. Keep sharing, liking, subscribing, leave a review, leave comments. We want to hear from you. The website's coming, I promise.
We want to interview more people.
Yes, we want to hear your stories.
We love having Alex Shea.
Oh, she was so great.
Will you be our next Alex Shea?
Will you be the next? Who will be next? The plague.
Rats.
The rat. Yeah, so we went from rats and
The
fleas and
plague.
squirrels. But yeah, so just keep all that stuff coming our way, and we will talk to you guys soon. This will actually probably drop on Halloween, so be safe out there.
Happy Halloween.
Yeah, go through all your candy.
All of our spooky people.
Spookies.
Spooky.
Spooky, spooky. And then it's on to Christmas. No,
No, not yet.
not yet.
Thanksgiving.
Yes.
Turkey
Oh,
time.
yeah, turkey time. All right. Well, yeah, that's going to do it. So until next time, bye.
Bye.
You have been listening to Sasquatch and Sourdough. I'm Christina, and thank you so much for tuning in. Sasquatch and Sourdough is so much more than just a podcast. We're a community of kindred spirits, united by our curiosity and fascination with the extraordinary. And we want to bring you into the conversation. So whether you've had a brush with the unexplainable, seen something that you can't quite wrap your head around, this is your space. We invite you to join us as we break bread and break down the barriers between the known and the unknown. If you want to share your story, you can email us at sasquatchandsourdough@gmail.com or send us a DM on Instagram. Until next time, remember, the truth is out there, God is with you, and everyone always ends up in the kitchen.